mainline churches like maybe Methodist or Lutheran who aren't talking about women's issues, that's fine. But those guys aren't talking about like any issues, right? Like those guys are seriously off at this point. Methodist is crazy. Any church that teaches the Bible will hold women accountable. There's no other way around that. If the Bible holds women accountable and a church teaches the Bible, the church will hold women accountable.
In recent years, a strange conflict has been brewing. Red pill men are trying to hold women accountable, often by way of Christian beliefs and scripture. Christian men are discrediting red pill men for their approach to holding women accountable in relationships and marriages. And in the middle, some men feel stuck trying to figure out which one actually explains their cognitive dissonance. For example, some red pill men claim that the male-female attraction dynamics follow predictable patterns, female hypergamy and leverage matter in relationships, institutions often obscure these realities, and that men must develop power, including status, money, and attractiveness, to avoid being exploited. Meanwhile, some Christian men claim that red pill encourages manipulation and domination, that it replaces moral leadership with status games, that the red pill trains men to treat women as adversaries, and that the red pill ignores Christian virtues like sacrifice and humility. So here's what's coming up. I'll review the issue, dissect arguments made by a Christian man in his video on that topic, then I'll review his response to comments on his own video, and then offer some commentary for guys. Because as I've mentioned in previous videos, experienced in real life and published in Confessions, acting on marriage and dating advice from Christian men based on biblical principles and then being hung out to dry when it all goes south can have very serious negative impacts.
It's time to all choose your timeline on the roller coaster of life.
This topic has been central to my teaching for more than 20 years based on my personal experience and my doctoral training. So I wanted to make this video as a sort of microcosm of Christianity versus the red pill based on recent online debates that broke out between two Christian YouTube channels. That's John Dirks and Effective Purpose. Both say that they're defending biblical truth, and both claim that the other side is misleading men. Here's what recently unfolded. Effective Purpose recently posted a video arguing that Christian influencers are sinning for not holding women accountable and that churches are failing men by downplaying women's sinful behaviors, and that the red pill functions as a necessary corrective because it recognizes and addresses women's misconduct that some Christian men will not. Here's a few clips from that video.
I've begun to notice a lot of Christian influencers working extra hard to keep attention away from women's behavior, even when that behavior is outright sinful. When you tell women for generations that it's oppressive for them to offer men something of substance, well, yeah, eventually you're gonna have a generation of men who don't go to women for anything but the shallow stuff that's left over. The red pill doesn't make women into anything. It just responds to what women make themselves into.
And here's just a bit of what Christian John Dirks posted in response to Effective Purpose's message. I'll show and respond directly to more here in just a moment.
Effective Purpose, a self-proclaimed red pillar, made a video laying out some egregious accusations against the church and Christian YouTubers like Ruslan and What Do You Meme who are not red pill. And in his video, he says that these guys are actually in sin for not handling women's sin appropriately. I'm going to pick things that he actually says, not things that he implies, and we're going to debunk those using scripture, okay?
So this is our focus today. In his response video, John Dirks rejects Effective Purpose's approach to holding women accountable and says that the red pill should be kept far away from Christianity. Again, remember, both of these are Christian YouTube men. As we'll see in a moment, Dirks opens by stressing that he considers Effective Purpose a brother and he wants a debate rather than a dunk video. But he also calls Effective Purpose's reasoning internally inconsistent, which rely heavily on fallacies, generalizations, and emotional appeals. Now, this should be no spoiler by now. There are several places in which Dirks does exactly what he accuses effective purpose of doing: internal inconsistency, fallacious reasoning, broad generalizations, and emotional framing. And I'm going to walk through some of those examples with Dirks' own clips as evidence. So let's dive in.
I consider effective purpose a brother. This is not a dunk video. If he sees this, brother, I want to talk to you about this. I think I left some comments on your video. Hopefully you saw them.
So real quick, I forgot to mention earlier, but I think this context is important. Dirks has about 1,190 subscribers after 380 videos, many of which are shorts, since starting his channel 8 months ago. Effective Purpose has over 27,000 subs with about half the number of videos, many of them shorts as well, on his channel that he started 4 years ago. And my first impression here is that Dirks is using his response video as a way to polarize viewers and gain visibility for his channel. And Dirks mentions someone named Ruslan, I think I'm saying that right, a Christian YouTube creator with over 800,000 subscribers as a potential ally. How Dirks knows this Ruslan person is unclear to me, but I think he's leaning on other people for his work right here.
I think Ruslan said he would find you a debate partner as well. This really should probably be handled in debate. If we want to go idea for idea.
Okay, let me stop it here real quick also. I'm going to get into a lot of his logical fallacies and that everything else and kind of tear some of his conversation down here in just a bit. But if he's saying that he wants this to be handled in a debate and not, what did he say? Not, handled in a debate, go idea for idea, then my question is, why is Dirks taking this public rather than organizing or waiting for that debate? Again, right out of the gate, he doesn't seem like a very Christian, biblical person to me.
I'm not going to be able to go minute by minute through his video because, number one, that's disingenuous. I don't appreciate the way he attacked John, just kind of picking and choosing things John said, didn't really give his audience even any time to hear John.
So here, Dirks is expressing his displeasure of someone else, that's Effective Purpose, making a video that disagrees with another Christian's video. Now, I'm not sure if that's irony or outright hypocrisy. Regardless, it's one of our first examples of outright holes in Dirks' entire response. He's also doing exactly what he condemns Effective Purpose of doing, and that's picking and choosing what he copies from other people's content and not giving his own audience the full context. I realize that this is messy, so let's get back to Dirks' own video response, and this will get cleared up here in just a moment.
I'm going to play as much of Effective Purpose's like talking points as I possibly can so that you guys have context, so that I'm not accused of ripping him out of context, not understanding him. No, I'm going to pick things that he actually says, not things that he implies, and we're going to debunk those using scripture, okay?
Okay. Here, I'm going to do the same thing with that Dirks says that he's going to do. I'm picking things that he actually says, not things that he implies. Right? So we're going to focus on that here in just a moment. Also, did he say debunk those things using scripture? Now, call me ignorant, but I believe that debunking requires evidence and facts, not religious beliefs. But let's move on.
Now, on a more harsh note, I think this video is an egregious example of logic. I think that it's very internally inconsistent. It's just full of fallacies and generalizations and emotional appeals, and I really think it's a disingenuous video.
Let me pause here for just a moment. Make a note of that. I'll chime in just a moment with specific hypocrisies as needed, including Dirks' own fallacies, generalizations, and emotional appeals that he just condemned, that he's so adamant about exposing from Effective Purpose. But for now, we'll skip ahead a few minutes in Dirks' own video. I'm going to let this play for just a couple of minutes so you can get an understanding of the conflict, and then I'll be back to respond.
Instead of making it about the entire red pill. Because, yeah, sure, it didn't work for a couple of heathen buffoons. But there are also plenty of people like myself for whom it's the only thing that worked, so this doesn't quite land like the gotcha it seems like he was imagining it to be. His next point is that because the red pill claims status and social proof will protect you from disrespect, and Akash is a wealthy, famous comedian with...
Okay, let's stop there because he goes on to a different point. So his first point is the hasty generalization fallacy. He doesn't like that all the red pillars were lumped into one category. He doesn't like that he was lumped into the same category as Andrew Tate, as Fresh and Fit, and all those guys. He's saying, no. He would probably say, I'm much more like Rollo Tomasi, right? I'm more of an OG red pillar. I'm not like these degenerate guys over here. And he also doesn't like that What Do You Meme said that it doesn't work because these guys couldn't get it to work. He points to his wedding ring and says, look, it worked for me. It was the only thing that worked. Now, I have two issues with this. First of all, let's just say fair, okay? If you don't want us to use hasty generalization, we won't. The problem is he's going to go on in the rest of his video, at least 30% of this video, to hastily generalize the church and hastily generalize every other group other than his own. So the very thing that he says, this is my problem with What Do You Mean, he goes on to do for most of his video, okay? Now, if we're not going to do that in this video. We're going to try and not generalize, okay? But we're going to hold him to that same standard. Second issue I have with this is that he says, and these are his own words, okay? So I'm not saying this is what it sounded like he's saying, which is, again, that's a problem Effective Purpose has, is he always says what John sounded like he was saying, what it felt like he was saying. No. We're going to talk about what you actually say, Effective Purpose. So what he actually said was, this is the only thing that worked.
Let me pause right here. And we're going to get into some details very quickly. At this point, Dirks is correct. Effective Purpose did say the only thing that worked for him in securing a wife was a red pill approach. But he did not say that it's the only thing that will ever work, or that it's the only thing that works for some guys, or what will work for all men. He said it's the only thing that worked for him. And this context is important. Effective Purpose did not say anything about only one thing that might have worked if he had tried other options. Of the options he's experienced and exercised, a red pill approach was the only one that worked for him in his relationship and ultimate marriage.
Now, as a Christian, I have a problem with that. He didn't say that the Bible, all the instruction I've ever learned, plus a little help from some data from the red pill. No, he says that was the only thing that worked for me. So that's not good.
My question right here is, why is it not good to say, but there are also plenty of people like myself for whom it's the only thing that worked? If it worked for him, it worked for him. Why is it not okay to say that, according to Dirks?
Okay, that means either he's lying, either he just didn't think of it. I'll try and be charitable.
So by Effective Purpose stating that the only thing that worked for him means he's a liar, or he didn't think to give credit to Scripture. And that, my friends, is a false dilemma which restricts a complex issue into only two, usually extreme and mutually exclusive options, ignoring valid alternatives outright. And according to Dirks, this false dilemma is him being generous.
Maybe he was just rambling and it just kind of came out. I don't know, but that's not appropriate.
Again, why is it not appropriate for a man to say that something was the only thing that worked for him?
You can't. That'd be like me saying, well, I have a great family, nothing to do with God, everything to do with me and what I learned, right? Now,
listen, this is a false analogy. Effective Purpose said the red pill was the only thing that worked for him. That's a statement about his personal experience. Yet Dirks turns that into a claim that Effective Purpose is denying God's role in his life, which is not what Effective Purpose said at all. The analogy only works by exaggerating and changing the original statement.
Ken, maybe he didn't mean that, but that's sure what he said. And so, that I have a problem with that, okay?
Let me pause here. Dirks gives his interpretation of what Effective Purpose said by saying, well, I have a great family, nothing to do with God, everything to do with me and what I learned right now. And Dirks follows with, but that's sure what he said, and also I have a problem with that. That's the problem here. Dirks isn't quoting Effective Purpose anymore. He's interpreting him and then criticizing that interpretation. And that's a direct straw man argument. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and bore you with every one of Dirks' logical breakdowns and his own fallacies. But I think I will do a follow-up video in which I review several of Dirks' scripture readings later that he does in his video, in which he recites scripture as evidence that the Christian church is in fact holding women accountable. In fact, from what I can tell, he's actually using scripture to make the exact point that Effective Purpose made in his video about the church needing to hold women accountable. Here's just a sample of one of those claims, again, from the same video that I'll follow up on later.
Because again, we're counteracting his idea that women are not held accountable by the Bible, which is insane, okay? Let your women keep silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but they are to be submissive, as the law also says.
All right, so be sure to subscribe and come back for that follow-up soon. But for now, we're only 8 minutes into Dirks' 44-minute video, which includes at least 11 logical fallacies that I identified. Here's a breakdown on the screen of the 11 fallacies I found in Dirks' argument. And remember, the 44-minute video includes several minutes of footage from Effective Purpose's original video and a whole bunch of scripture readings. So he's expressing these fallacies at a pace of more than one every 4 minutes. And that doesn't even include the scripture arguments that he relies on later in this video, again, which I'll cover in my own follow-up to be released soon. I would argue, and hopefully many of you agree, that if you're going to accuse someone of using fallacies, generalizations, and emotional appeals, you probably shouldn't build your entire argument on them. And that's exactly what Dirks did throughout his video. So let's continue by looking at how Dirks responds to comments in his video in which viewers called him out. I'll put this comment to Dirks' video on the screen for you to pause and have a look, because it's very long and detailed, with more than 20 likes from viewers. Essentially, it's a viewer pointing out many of Dirks' errors in reasoning, which begins with this. Sorry, man, but this was a little hard to watch. I could barely get through half the video. You committed a handful of fallacies of your own and didn't even realize you were doing it while trying to explain logic at the same time. Again, have a look at the entire video. It's very detailed, and I think it's a great video from somebody who watched his Dirks' full content. And here's Dirks' response to that comment on his own video. I'm also not going to read this one, but feel free, again, to pause and have a look. Basically, Dirks responds to the original comment by repeatedly saying things like, "That's not a no true Scotsman," and "I didn't straw man." But he doesn't actually walk through the reasoning that would show why the commenter's accusations are wrong. Instead, his response relies on declaring the critique incorrect rather than carefully dismantling it. It's somewhat circular logic, like, I'm correct because I'm not incorrect. Overall, you can see that Dirks' response functions mainly as a defensive rebuttal, not a detailed response with logical critiques that he claims he uses. He rejects the accusations, but does so largely by assertion and definitional framing, rather than systematically showing that the alleged fallacies or mischaracterizations didn't occur. And this gets to a much bigger issue that goes far beyond one YouTube debate. A lot of men today are increasingly distrustful of the Christian church when it comes to men, women, dating, and marriage. And when we look at exchanges like this, it's not hard to understand why. If men see arguments that rely on misrepresentations, false dilemmas, or selective reasoning, it starts to look less like careful guidance and more like protecting a narrative. And once that trust starts to erode, men will start looking for answers elsewhere. And listen, that's also part of why conversations like the Red Pill movement gained traction in the first place. Whether people agree with it or not, many men felt that the church simply wasn't addressing the realities that they were experiencing in modern relationships. And the data bear this out. For example, in the early 2010s, 28% of women attended services weekly, compared to 22% of men, showing a measurable gender gap in participation. And just last year, in 2025, Pew Research reported that the percentage of men who consider themselves to be Christians dropped from 74% in 2007 to 59% in 2024. And in many congregations today, women outnumber men by a significant margin, especially among younger adults. So when men say that they feel disconnected from the church's messaging about relationships, they're not just making that up. The demographic trends suggest that many men are quietly disengaging. Hell, many of us not even quietly. Now listen, I'm not saying that Christianity is wrong. If that's your thing, then have fun and knock yourself out. My contention is that men are increasingly turned away from it, and I think it's a lack of holding women accountable that's one of the major reasons why. And if churches want to reach men again, they'll need to do better than simply dismissing the concerns that drove men to look elsewhere in the first place. So listen, thanks for watching to the end, and I'll be back soon with a review of Dirks' scripture readings from this same video.